The tortoise who talked too much. A long time ago, in a small African village surrounded by thick forests, there lived a tortoise named Kwaku. Kwaku was known far and wide, not because he was wise or hardworking, but because he talked too much. His mouth never rested. From sunrise to sunset, Kwaku always had something to say. He loved telling stories about himself, giving advice nobody asked for, and interrupting others when they spoke. The animals in the forest often said, "Kwaku's words are louder than the drumming rain." But Kwaku didn't care. He enjoyed being the center of attention. He believed he was the smartest, the funniest, and the most important animal in the forest. One day, news spread through the forest like wildfire. The king of the birds was throwing a grand feast in the sky. The birds were excited. There would be food, juicy mangoes, sweet berries, fresh grains, everything one could dream of. The problem was, only animals that could fly were invited. The feast was in the clouds, and no one who walked on the ground could get there. Kwaku wanted to go. He imagined himself at the feast, eating the best food, talking to the birds, and being the star of the day. But how could he, a tortoise, reach the sky? Kwaku thought and thought until an idea came to him. He called the birds together and said, "My dear friends, I am very hungry. Can you let me join your feast? I have an idea that will help me get to the sky." The birds, curious, asked, "How will you do that, Kwaku? You don't have wings." Kwaku smiled. "I only need one feather from each of you. If you each give me one, I will tie them together to make wings. Then I can fly like you." The birds whispered among themselves. Some didn't trust Kwaku because of his big mouth, but others said, "Let's help him. It's only one feather each." So, each bird plucked one feather and gave it to Kwaku. He tied them together carefully and made himself a big, colorful pair of wings. When he was done, he looked like a strange, flying tortoise. On the day of the feast, the birds flew up to the sky with Kwaku right behind them. He flapped his borrowed wings and laughed loudly. "Look at me. The great Kwaku is flying. The sky is lucky to have me." The birds rolled their eyes. "Kwaku, we are just flying. Save your talking for the feast," they said. But Kwaku couldn't stop. He bragged all the way to the sky. "I will be the most important guest at the feast. Everyone will listen to my stories." The birds grew tired of his chatter but didn't say much. They wanted to enjoy the feast. When they arrived in the sky, the feast was just as grand as Kwaku had imagined. Tables made of clouds were filled with all kinds of delicious food. The birds began to eat and dance, but Kwaku had another idea. "Wait," Kwaku shouted. "Before we eat, we must decide something important." The birds stopped and looked at him. "What is it, Kwaku?" "We need names for this feast. I suggest that we call it Kwaku's Feast, because it's the first time a tortoise is here," he said proudly. The birds didn't like this idea. "Why should the feast be named after you, Kwaku? We helped you get here." But Kwaku ignored them. He started eating, talking loudly, and boasting about how smart he was. The birds became angry. They realized they had made a mistake inviting Kwaku. As the feast went on, Kwaku's talking grew worse. He talked about himself, interrupted others, and even laughed at some of the birds' stories. One wise bird, the eagle, finally spoke up. "Kwaku, you have eaten our food, used our feathers, and now you're spoiling our feast with your big mouth. It's time for you to go back to the ground." The birds agreed. They surrounded Kwaku and began pulling off the feathers he had borrowed. "If you can't respect us, you don't deserve to stay here," they said. Kwaku pleaded, "Wait, don't take the feathers. How will I get back to the ground?" But the birds didn't care. They took all their feathers back, leaving Kwaku with nothing. Kwaku was stuck in the sky. He looked down and saw the ground far below. "What do I do now?" he cried. The birds laughed. "Maybe your big mouth will help you fly back." Kwaku had no choice. He curled into his shell and fell from the sky like a rock. He hit the ground hard, and his shell cracked into many pieces. From that day, Kwaku's shell was never smooth again. It was covered in cracks, a reminder of the day he talked too much and paid the price. After his fall, Kwaku became quiet. He realized that sometimes, it's better to listen than to talk. The animals in the forest noticed the change in him. Kwaku doesn't talk as much anymore, they said. Answer: the story of Kwaku the tortoise spread across the land. Parents told it to their children, reminding them, a wise person listens more and talks less.